Uh, all right, let's do some JoJo talk. I just realized JoJo's is its own show, so this is no longer the Roundabout cast. But I also don't know the name of our JoJo show, so
It's the Roundabout cast. What are you talking about?
that'll be figured out in post.
Yeah,
I'll brainstorm that later.
Damn it.
What's wrong, Joe?
Oh, Monster Prom got an update. And
Monster Prom got an update?
Yeah. I love Monster Prom. It's one of my favorite games.
Is that the thing where they look like Bratz dolls?
Yeah.
Oh no, that's Monster High. Okay,
Hey, can I talk about Monster Prom? Because I really like this game.
Oh, yeah, you showed me Monster Prom. That actually looked fire.
The only Monster Prom we're talking about is what's going on in Dio's castle,
Our JoJo show is called Talk Like an Egyptian.
Alright, that's not bad.
Yep.
It'll be considered. Alright, JoJo's Part 3, the big one. The only part that matters because it has the strongest stand and the strongest boy.
And the strongest, just like...
Jotaro Kujo.
Oh!
So, Part 3 is really interesting because this is the part where I think JoJo's blew up as a phenomenon. That it was the first explosion. It didn't really blow up until 2012 with the anime, and that's when it went international. But
yeah, I feel like a lot of people, if they've seen nothing else of JoJo's, they've seen Jotaro.
Yes.
Like they know him.
Well, I mean, seeing Jotaro and Dio is how I got into JoJo's because in 2006, young Willer picks up Jump Ultimate Stars for Christmas, opens it up early, and then rewraps it, and my brother totally finds out. But regardless, still got it in though.
Yeah, fucking Jotaro and Dio are the only two assholes they put in the Jump games.
Well,
sometimes Jonathan, I guess.
So Jotaro and Dio are the two playable characters, and I'm like, who are these fucking weirdos with their robots? And why do they have so many support characters that look nothing like them? I was like, because Johnny's in that game, Jolene, all the JoJos and Gyro are in that game.
That's crazy that they're in that game.
And I'm just like, who the fuck are all these? A lot of people use the Josuke support that would heal you online. I would use it, and I had no idea what it was. So I just decide to read it, and I see a review that's like, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure starts with Jotaro in prison, because it was talking about the OVA anime for this.
Oh yeah.
A whole bombshell. And then I start the anime, or the manga, and I'm like, what the fuck is this, like, 20th century, nothing to do with prison and ghosts?
Yeah, where's Prison Boy?
Prison ghosts.
Eventually, I get to my prison boy, very excited, and the realization hits me that in my first read-through of Part 3, I actually didn't like it too much.
Oh.
And I was really bummed out because... and we're live. Technical difficulties murdered me. But we should be good now. I think I was midway through talking about how disappointed I was in Part 3 the first time that I watched it.
Yeah.
Or read it, rather. I think that brings us into proper discussion of it. My problems with Part 3, especially the first time, were Jotaro and the first half of Part 3. And I still hold that first half complaint to this day. I now like Jotaro as a character. The other parts really help flesh him out too, which makes him more endearing in this part in retrospect. But the introduction of stands is really cool, but the stands that you get in the beginning aren't very necessarily interesting. They're just like, oh, you have more stands.
They're not incredibly fun. I feel like going from Part 2 to Part 3 was basically 2 steps forward, 1 step back in Iraqi developing what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because Part 2 really nailed down the whole... The way to get out of this fight isn't by punching harder, it's by figuring out how to punch your opponent correctly, essentially. Whereas when Part 3 starts, it is, I gotta punch this guy harder for most of the time. There are some exceptions to that first half, but most of the time, it's I just need to like hit this person enough times to where they stop moving. I feel.
It's underselling it a little bit. The fights, there's so many of them, and they're not as high quality as the other stand of the week fights that we get from Part 4 onwards.
Right.
So it has the most number of encounters, and a lot of them aren't that interesting in the first half. You get stuff like Empress, which is not that interesting of an encounter. It's just like there's a wart on Joseph, and he has to figure out.
I love that encounter because it's so different from everything else.
Yeah, I think that's one of the better ones.
I like Lovers.
Lovers is a classic one, but
Lovers has a really good climax, and the part where Jotaro makes himself a bridge is amazing.
Mhm.
And here's your receipt is amazing. But then you also have stuff like Polnareff versus Avdol, where it's like this fight boiled down to Avdol shooting a flame underground and making a statue melt to look like red magician's red, and it's like
and then we have the car that just runs them over.
We have a car that shoots gasoline, and that's all right. From the first half, I think the big standout arc for me is Emperor and the Hanged Man, of course. That's a really good one. It also has a lot of story influence, so it doesn't feel as fillery as the others felt at the time. Not much character development is happening aside from the important ones like Hanged Man. And I also really, really like Death 13, where Kakyoin has to figure out how to get out of this dream scenario while everyone thinks that he's insane. That one's really fun too. But aside from that, I don't think many of the encounters were that interesting. And even on my first go through, it was really weighing down on me just how long that first half was dragging on. And I didn't see an end in sight because I didn't know there would be an Egypt arc. So it was just like, oh my god. Like I'm halfway through the part looking at the chapter count, and I feel like we haven't done very much.
Yeah. It's like in the shows in the part split into 2 seasons, and that first season it really, and like there's even a whole character that gets introduced in Stardust Crusaders and has no relevance to the plot.
Yeah,
the little girl.
And it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Do you remember when they fought the sun?
Yeah. So the sun is like a 1-chapter gag that they stretched out into 1 full episode in the anime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm a big time anime watcher, and I remember I was watching this and I go, Willer, this is just Team Rocket every single episode, and it ends with Stans blasting off again.
That's right. Yeah.
I love the sun episode because it's so quick and it's funny. And you get that.
I like the sun chapter.
Yeah, makes sense.
The anime has also this thing where like they really fleshed out some fight. I enjoyed part 3 a lot more because of the anime, but also some fights really drag on. Like you have that part where the lovers is talking about how they're the most strongest, and they're like dancing and doing the can for a whole goddamn minute, saying most. And I'm like, this does not translate well into anime. This is just annoying. What would have been a 1-panel gag with like a speech bubble where like most is just written all over it and you can just quickly interpolate your eye is dragged out into 40 seconds of annoying voice acting.
I do not remember this stand at all.
The lovers goes inside your brain and then makes you feel the pain that the user is feeling.
Yeah, I think the lovers...
Is that the one episode where Hierophant Green learns how to shrink?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the lovers was the first one where I was like, okay, that's a pretty cool one.
Yeah.
You didn't like
Inyaba and her whole zombies?
Justice is cool, but again, it's dragged out in the anime, I feel like.
It also has a terrible climax where it's just a big suck.
That's another thing. Jotaro's just pulling out these moves out of his ass, and they're not cool moves either. Like
Starfinger!
Who would think of Starfinger as an attack?
Starfinger!
I do like Oingo Boingo.
Oingo Boingo's on the second half, though.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the second half. Let's talk about the characters, too. So we have a cast of 6. I believe we have Jotaro, we have Old Joseph, we have Kakyoin, Avdol, Polnareff, and Iggy. How do y'all feel about this cast by themselves, and how do you feel about them in relation to other JoJo casts?
I actually really think the Part 3 cast is my third favorite behind 6 and 7. I really like the part 3 cast.
There's
I do-
something
I do-
endearing about them. They're,
Mhm.
they're not the deepest, but they're a good collection of different personalities.
Yeah,
You-
I think one of the big things about the cast is that, like, and I think it comes down to interactions. Like, whenever I think about the cast and them interacting with each other, the one that comes to mind every time is Paul Naraf and Kakyoin doing this stupid ass handshake in the submarine as they're dying.
Yeah.
And that makes me laugh every time. But it perfectly encapsulates like what's going on this whole adventure. Is that
I
It's
think of Jotaro getting butt fucked by Avdol and him being like, "This is against my image."
you mean Joseph?
Yeah, Joseph. Sorry.
Yeah. It's just,
Cherry Prince Mundo is my favorite.
That would be Campion.
I think individually they're not the most deep characters. Paul and Naraf being the only really deep one that has some sort of connection to Dio to get back at him. Than Joseph and Jojo are like, we have to save Molly, and I'm like, okay.
Campion
And
was
Joseph,
like, he just feels guilty, so he's there for that. Iggy's just there because
he's a dog.
Yeah.
He has some good moments at the very end of the series, but like when you're introduced to him, he's just the dog. And like the thing about Joseph, it's kind of hard because we've already experienced Joseph's adventure, but he's almost a whole new character in this part. But he's also the same character, so it's a really weird kind of thing.
I thought the aging of Joseph was really well done, personally.
I do too.
He still gets through the essence of Joseph, but it's just weird to see him sidelined. But I like it.
Yeah.
I might like old Joseph better than young Joseph, to be honest, which is not a very common opinion.
Right. I think I might be the same, but I also really like just those old man characters.
That's true. You just like
He's-
yourself.
I
He's
do.
got those parts where he still goes, ultimate strategy, run away!
Yeah.
Jotaro does it once too in the fucking Yellow Temperance fight, which is another fight.
Yeah.
Well, y'all know me, I hate character development.
It's
So, part 3 is really high up on my list of like, these characters are static, they're gonna each learn one lesson, one of them's gonna die, one of them's gonna go blind and then die, and it's great. It all has this world building. I'm like, this was the closest it got for me as
Part 3 does have world building. It's just that the world building is a reflection of Araki's research of our own world.
yeah.
But I think it's really charming when they go into restaurants and they have to learn how to order food there, or they're learning how to barter. Or my favorite one is in the manga in particular. They get to India and Avdol's like, "This place is great. Everyone's so friendly. You're gonna love it." And you turn the page and you have this two-page spread of just 1,000 Indians surrounding the Jojo crew, asking them for money and just trying to sell them shit. And I think it's just so fun, and like I like all the locations they visit. There's some really pretty ones too.
Yeah.
I think, and this is a really hot take, but I think we all kind of share this take. Part 5 is like a better executed part 3, but part 3 is also somehow better. Just from the characters. Like, each individual character in part 5 is so much deeper, but the group dynamic in part 3 is so much easier to latch onto.
It's a lot more fun in part 3. Part 3 feels like you're actually on a road trip, enjoying the time with these characters, and that eventually it's going to come to an end. Like you have an X on the map where you need to get to.
Yeah.
Part 5, it's like, oh, we have to go here. Now we have to go here. Now we have to go here. Now we have to go here. But actually, we have to go here. So you're going all around the place, but you don't really know where you're going.
Also, part 5 only takes place in 5 days.
Yeah.
While this is a exhaustive, like, 50-day journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the end of the day, we'll table this for a little bit, but at the end of the day, I think the journey aspect is what makes part 3 redeemable, despite like some of its more aged concepts and portions.
I know if we're comparing it to part 5, I know what the specific element that I think puts this above part 5 for me is the main characters, because the JoJos, because Jotaro and Giorno are both actually pretty pretty stoic guys, and there's not a whole lot going on there. But Jojo actually does change in some ways over the course of his journey.
In very nice, subtle ways too, right?
Yeah, you know, at the beginning, he really is just like a punk teenager, and he's like, "Fuck you, mom." But by the end, I was really proud of him. I'm like, he's a man now, and yeah, I mean, he's still a rough dude, but he knows when to give respect, and he did this whole journey for his mom, who he was cussing out at the beginning, and I think by the end of this, I can see how he became the more responsible Jotaro we see in later parts.
Yeah, like end of part 3, Jotaro is the same man who says, "We have been through this impossible journey. Don't tell me what's impossible," before he revives fucking Joseph Joestar.
Yeah,
And
As a line that's really cool, it's like he never once really complained about the journey, just complained about everyone else's antics. But he just like he went on this journey to save his mom, and he was just super cool and stoic about it. But what really gets me is when he hugs Polnareff and old Joseph, the only people who survived with him, and it feels like such a genuine hug. And you see how much he's grown to like these people despite trying to act so cool and pretending like he doesn't. And that's endearing in its own way.
And then I don't know. Is this an anime only thing when we get that shot of him on the plane with the picture, or is that in the manga?
The picture is not in the manga because it only shows up in part 5, and then they retroactively added it to the anime. But
Yeah.
you get the shot of him in the plane looking out longingly, I believe.
Because
the last shot is them walking away in their 3 directions. It's one of the two.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all know me.
Wait,
I hate character.
No, you do hate character development. I'll be right back because I can get the mangas right now.
While he does that, I'm gonna say my bit. I hated part 5. Doesn't even come close.
Part 5. I don't know if it's my least favorite part, but it's down there, man.
It's right down there above part 1.
I will say probably the anime adaptation was probably not that good. If that's why I disliked it so much, I could agree with that.
The anime adaptation, I think, actually makes part 5 a lot better than it was originally, in my opinion.
Really?
Part 5 is a great anime. I think.
Yeah. So the last shot is them walking away and the plane flying over.
Yeah, I got my volume 18 here. God damn, that's a thick boy.
We need some camera work, Willer.
My camera doesn't work on this computer, unfortunately. So they're walking away, and then you get this plane shot flying back, and you get to see the globe.
Yeah.
It's like the entire length of the journey they traveled. You get to see it here in this last shot, which is kind of beautiful.
But I like that last shot for just Jotaro alone because you see Jotaro like looking at the picture and kind of like realizing like this whole experience they had has been a memorable one, and Joseph's looking at him, being you can tell Joseph is just does a small smile and realizes that it's had an impact on him, and it kind of ends tragically because literally everyone dies but 3 people, but at the same time it just was a point where Jotaro was like, oh, I can actually appreciate people and who they are because they're not going to be around forever. And that's like the big thing.
We can transition into the second half talk now. Let's just we'll just to wrap it up in a long wrap up, I guess. When we hit that Egypt arc, even the first time I was reading it, that's when I got really into it. I was back in because the second half starts introducing stands that are more like part 4 stands. Where all of a sudden you have, okay, this stand is just water, but the way that it moves around gives an interesting fight mechanic when combined with the fact that Iggy can glide. And you have stuff like Oingo Boingo, which is a comedy arc that is also reused in the future while giving Oingo this weird character development. You get really cool stuff like Darby the Gambler and Darby the Gamer, which are the first game type stands that we run into, which end up being such an important archetype that help JoJo's not just be like fights to the death, but you can have these arcs where it's just Araki exploring the intensity of just a little game or a little wager. You have cool stuff like Bastet and Mariah who can magnetize people into such funny scenarios with Joseph and Avdol.
Man, this is the electrical outlet is the stand, and it's just so hilarious. Because it's an American outlet.
But they touch it anyways. It's great. I really like the finisher of that fight where they crush her and they just double penetrate her.
Oh, great.
Sides.
I love double penetration.
Horus, the most terrifying stand.
Right. Maybe my favorite fight, my favorite action fight of JoJo's, where it's just like, this is just hardcore action.
Mhm.
Horus would rank pretty high up there. It's like the White Album fight, where it's just this hot-blooded fight involving ice. Pet Shop is by far my favorite villain of Part 3, because it's just a bird who is the Terminator.
I think a testament to how well executed this fight was is that it actually made me care about Iggy for a few moments.
Absolutely.
Like, in his most dying moments, I was actually really rooting for him, which I never thought I would do because Iggy's my least favorite character in this part. But during this fight, I was like, "Come on, man, you can do it."
And they do it by having him save the little boy, and he's fighting so tough. What's cool about Iggy is that he doesn't have a horse in this race until this fight gets him invested, because it just pisses him off hard enough to get him in there.
Yeah,
He loses a leg, and he's just like, "All right, that's it."
I gotta kill this motherfucker. And then you
I
get
love-
freaking Vanilla Ice, man.
Ugh. I say "ew" as in it's terrifying and just
That fight, I don't like stuff that's overpowered. That is that overpowered. Like Vanilla Ice has such a minuscule weakness to how powerful he is.
it's a minuscule weakness that only happens because, well, I guess you're talking about he can't see anything. I was gonna say the only way to beat him is because he turns into a vampire, and they push him into the sunlight.
Which is nice.
yeah. There are some of these guys that I'm like, why are they Dio's henchmen?
Well, about being Dio's henchman, I think a line that really makes me like this last group of henchmen is Endul, the first one they fight that has Geb, the water stand. When he's about to die, he says, "Evil also needs a hero."
Oh,
And I think that's a badass line to show why these people would be following him without flesh buds. It's like, we're all kind of rotten people, and we've come to realize that. But Dio's this charming hero to the rotten.
it's like they need to unite them, otherwise they'd kind of be lonely in
You
their.
can bring them to heaven.
Yeah. I guess
Speaking of
that,
Dio, he's pretty cool.
it's a good segue into Dio, right? So, Part 3 Dio's weird because he loses a lot of the emotional connection that made Part 1 Dio such a good villain for the time.
Like eye lasers.
Like, yeah, that's what made Dio so good, and being able to freeze your pee-pee by touch. But Dio in Part 3, Dio with all caps, as he's known now, is really entertaining nonetheless, because he's such a demanding presence.
Yeah, he is like the incarnation of the menacing sound effect, basically, in this part.
He really is, and his fight is not what I expected it to be. It's a lot more technical, a lot more strategic than what Jotaro versus Dio would lead you to believe, right? There's a lot of tricks being pulled both ways.
There's only really one straight up fighting part, and that's when they're in the street and they punch each other so hard they gain the ability to fly.
The anime treated that so weird, because in my impression, they were all jumping around.
Yeah.
And to some degree they are, but the anime is just like, they're jumping around, but they're also like going zoop, zoop, zoop in the sky. Which is weird. But alright. The only
It's so
other times that people have flown in JoJo's is at the end of Part 5, someone starts flying, and in the rock, paper, scissors fight in Part 4, where they're going so hard that they start flying.
Yeah.
So I tend to like Part 1 Dio as a character more, but Part 3 Dio, the fact that he shows up so late is not a good positive for him, but I do really like his final fight regardless.
I do. I like the final fight of Part 3 is one of the big reasons why I really like Part 3. And Part 3's final fight is one of my favorites still. There's just something about it that when they reach Dio and he just trounces on everybody. Like he like goes ham. Like he is the unstoppable force that they were afraid they were going to have to fight eventually.
And I actually really freaking like Part 3 Dio I don't know if I like him more than part 1 because, like you said, like part 1 Dio does a really good job of making you hate him and want him to lose.
Yeah.
And I think one reason I particularly like part 3 Dio though is I think the one line that always stuck with me from Dio from part 3 is where he says, you know, at the end of the day, the only thing that everybody is after is their own peace of mind. People just want peace of mind. It kind of lets me see into his motivations more than I'm just being shitty just to be shitty. He wants peace of mind, and what that means for him is being powerful and being able to dominate and eliminate people, which it kind of makes sense that peace of mind for him would be power, because when he was little, before the events of part 1, he came from a place of no power in life.
Yeah.
So I really like it.
It's also not to talk too much about part 6. It feeds really nicely into some part 6 stuff.
Yeah.
As the fight itself is also a reason why I think part 3 might edge out 5 for me. I think the last fight of part 5 is a horrible mess, as I've talked about in the podcast before. Part 3's fight is really cool, and it's split up into 2 halves, and I like them both equally. The first half is the Kakyoin half, and the Joseph half, and that one has a lot of emotional stakes as they desperately try to find out what Dio's power is, which has been a recurring plot thread since they've gotten midway through Egypt. They're like, all right, we need to buckle down and start interrogating some of these fools for what his power is. So
that was always something that I think was brought up throughout the entirety of this part, was that the biggest step you can take against the stand is figuring out what it can do.
Yeah.
And if you can see what your stand can do for a long period of time, you have the advantage for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And you get... go on.
I was going to say that was like the world building aspect that I will say that like kept me so motivated and interested, was them looking for the power, but also the looming presence that he held. And it's like, it was kind of like a timer where like they're constantly trying, like as they get closer to him, they still can't figure out the power.
Yeah.
And it's like they're just trying to figure it out. It's like a deadline of you trying to finish your homework or something, or like some project. It's like the deadline's coming up, but it's still, it's like, it's weird because, you know, you think that they could have just taken more time or like investigated more, but they really couldn't. They always had to be moving forward towards it.
They have the second timer of Holly's death, which is a good structure for this journey. You got Holly dying, and I really like how you brought that up. The closer and closer to get the Dio, the less and less time they have to figure out his power, and they critically don't figure it out until they're fighting him, and to figure it out, Kakyoin has to die, and at this point, Iggy and Avdol have also died, so that's 3 deaths before they can even figure out Dio's power, leaving 3 Crusaders left to somehow deal with it. Which is a really good setup for the second half.
How did Avdol die? Did he just get like straight up murdered?
Yeah.
No, I straight ate him. Like he's out of that fight immediately.
Yeah, he pushes Iggy and Polnareff out of the way.
Oh,
I was
God.
shocked when that happened. I legitimately thought that he wasn't dead and he was just like sucked into whatever and they were gonna get him back. I was like, oh, he's dead.
Me too.
Dead. It just happens.
From the JoJo's that I've seen so far, part 3 really tugs emotionally at you with the loss of those characters.
And getting down to it, I think that's part 3's ending's best strength, is the fact that it was exhausting to read part 3, right? It's so long and there's so many fights, but that ends up being a strength when at the end, these characters that you've slaved away with die. It hits you really hard. You're like, oh my god, y'all came so far. 2 of you didn't even get to the final boss. Y'all died on phase 1 out of like 4. Oh, it's heartbreaking.
It's
and it makes...
Imagine basically a Pokemon Nuzlocke.
Yeah.
You made Elite 4 and you lost in the first.
That's
rounds.
rough, man. Avdol's your starter and he just dies immediately. It's a really cool aspect. And then the second half of the fight is Jotaro versus Dio, and I really like the tricks that Jotaro has to pull off in order to kind of give himself enough time to realize how he's going to counter the world. Which at first is just like, okay, as soon as the time stop ends or he gets close to me, I'm just gonna punch his face in. And that's a pretty good goal, and it works until he sucks Joseph's blood and becomes high Dio.
Or even before then, at that point, he's just like, well, I'm just going to throw knives at you now. And he just starts throwing knives. And there's one of my favorite sequences in the whole fight is when Jotaro's on the ground, he has to pretend he's dead. He has to wait for Dio to get close enough and just punch him in the face. Like, it's one of my favorite moments because he's sitting there and he has to, like, stop his heart and he has to hold his breath. And it's just a painful experience. And then he finally is able to pull it off. And you get this great, like, in the anime, like, rolling credit sequence where he's just like, I'm gonna fucking beat you now.
Yeah, Dio's crawling away and he makes it to Joseph. And then, man, the anime does the road roller so well. The setup for the road roller, I never realized how good it was. It was just a meme to me until like I watched it for the first time in the anime. Because I've read it, road roller was like the first Jojo meme I've ever seen. I was like, haha, funny. But it's basically just like, I'm pissed off. We're at the end of this fight. The next time I see Dio outside the time stop, I'm going to end it with a single punch, which is a really cool setup for that ending, right? Mm-hmm. And it's so crushing when the next time he sees Dio, there's a giant road roller between the two, and he is not going to get that clean punch in.
It's funny. I remember hearing, like, Jojo obviously blew up a lot when the anime came out. And that's when I'd say like most Western people got on the train. But I remember hearing back in the day, like a decade ago, if someone was in the JoJo, it was probably because of road roller flash animation memes.
Hell yeah. Which also had part 5 animation, so there was some deep cuts in
there. Along with part 3, isn't there a 90s animation version of it?
Yes, there is the 90s OVA.
We still need to watch that.
No, I'm good, man. I've
watched parts of it. I've watched a lot of it, actually, like good parts, but there are some of it that I really like. One thing that stands out in particular is they hold off on showing you the world a lot longer in that OVA, to the point you only see it when Jotaro actually sees it. Like, there's a point where he's walking up to Jotaro and the world is just, like, destroying things, and it's invisible. And then finally, when they come into contact, it shows up.
The one thing I like about the OVA better is the heart stop scene is a lot more excruciating in that scene. They hold it off for longer, which I think was a good call. Anime versus manga comparisons. When Kakyoin's about to die, in the anime, we just see him suddenly fly back, and then he has to figure out, and then we get the flashback of what Dio did in the stop time. In the manga, you just see the stop time the first time, so you don't get that extended suspense to what the power actually is. And I think I like how the anime did it better as a result. Part 3 good. I did mention the one thing I always complain about it, which is, I can also stop time. Same type of stand.
Oh my god. So it's the same type of stand as Star Platinum.
That meme of him saying that's a rat and then turning Star Platinum into a sniper rifle is the best.
So I will say though, I like that before. So when I was watching the series, I totally forgot about Dio with his whole Hermit Purple bullshit and having that had to be retconned as Jonathan's stand or whatever.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, it kind of was a parallel of like Dio stole Jonathan's stand essentially, like stole his bloodline, and he's getting the stand because he has his body, and Jotaro inherits the stand later and is able to beat back and claim what's rightfully his bloodline's power. Yeah. That was always my first interpretation of it.
It's funny. It's funny how our minds have to work to make a Rocky bullshit work.
Yeah, Willard and I carry Rocky through a lot of dumb things.
Yeah, part of being a JoJo's fan is having to do half the writing work for a Rocky.
I didn't get to that point around like the end of part 6, beginning of part 7 for a very long time. I was like, JoJo's is bullshit, man.
And then you turn out that Rocky just needs a whole month to write his chapters, and he's really good.
Yeah. Man, going monthly was the best decision that man ever made.
But anyways, part 3 good. Willard, let's do our rankings.
Right. We have been doing
shit.
rankings. It's just been so long since we. Hold on. Let me go get my charger just in case, because my.
I forgot what I ranked them last time. I hope I'm.
You have to re-rank them.
I hope I'm consistent.
I have a relatively strong idea of what my ranks are, if I remember correctly. We've done 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7.
So, as you'll recall, we're gonna play a little game here. You're gonna rank what we've covered. You're gonna rank the main villain, the main Jojo, the arc as a whole, and then also say your top 3 favorite arcs of part 3 specifically.
Oh, okay.
Let's do villains first. I would go. Ooh, this is kind of tough. So we've only done 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I would go Valentine first,
Mm-hmm.
and then Dio 1, Dio 3, Diavolo Cars. Those are my villain rankings.
I would go. This is for my villains. It'd definitely be Valentine, Dio Brando, Dio, Cars, Diavolo.
Yeah, I think I'll go Valentine, Dio 1, Dio 3, Cars, and then Bug Diavolo. I just hate it.
Tyler, you can do them all except 7.
So I'm gonna go with Valentine first.
You don't even know. You're not wrong.
Part 3 Dio.
Ooh.
All right.
Then I'm gonna go with Cars and the rest of the Statue Boys. Part 1 Dio, and then Diavolo.
All right.
I'm the only one who did. I put Diavolo second to last. I am the hero everyone needs. Protagonist wise, I would go Johnny, Jotaro, but my opinions on Jotaro are a little tainted because he's so good in 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then Joseph, Giorno, Jonathan.
I have the exact same.
Nice.
I have the exact same, I think, as well.
Nice.
Actually,
Wait.
Joseph is above Jotaro for me.
Let's see. I'm gonna go part 2 first.
Yeah.
Then 3 because I can't remember all the Joes. No, wait. Part 2, then 4.
No, we're not doing 4 yet.
Oh yeah.
Spoiler alert.
2, 7.
7.
3.
Oh, we forgot 7.
I give up. Same.
I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. Johnny's at the top for me for sure. We've totally skipped over Johnny for some reason.
I did not. I put him as my first.
Did you?
Sure.
Okay.
Same.
Oh, yeah.
All right, part
Johnny
rankings should be a lot easier for me. It goes 7. Actually, it's not that easy because 7 and then 2, 3, and 5 do like a little triangle dance where depending on the day they'll be next.
Mm-hmm.
And then 1.
Mine is definitely 7, 3, 2, 5, and then 1.
Mine's the same as Joe's.
Mine is I will actually leave 7 out of this since I haven't seen it and I do care about whether it's better or not for the plot. 1, 3, 2, and then 5.
Homeboy just put part 1 as his favorite.
That is the only reason I kept watching the show.
Wow.
Oh, Tyler.
That's a hot take.
Tyler hates character development. He said it
I
himself, boys.
Yeah.
I hate character
My
development.
favorite farts. My favorite farts in part 3 are
Iggy.
Pet Shop, Dio, and Darby Gambler.
Pet
I think my favorites would be in no particular order.
yeah.
Darby Gambler, Mariah, and Lovers.
Lovers.
I like Dio, Darby Gambler, and Pet Shop.
Yeah.
I want to give a special shout out to Oingo Boingo and the second Whole Horse arc as my least favorite ones of the entire bunch.
Shout outs. Worse than fucking Blue Moon, where they're talking underwater and barnacles are my power. All right.
I go in no order. Horus, or Pet Shop Oingo Boingo, Death 13, and Strength, or Forever.
Strength. Get this boy out of here.
That thing was so bad. It was so bad. I couldn't not look away.
All right, fair enough. Thank you for joining us to our JoJo show that is unnamed.
Juju.